Welcome to our webinar on which Park City properties require flood insurance, a topic that is on everybody's mind. Not really. It's an important topic, so we're going to cover it. And it's important because you need to find out, is your Park City property located in a flood zone? This is a key question, so we've dedicated a special webinar to address this because you need to know what that means if it applies to you. And so I brought in a powerhouse expert here. I brought in Bonita Vanderkooi here, who is my State Farm insurance agent. She's got 25 years of experience, and she's an expert on the flood insurance, which not every insurance agent spends a lot of time on. So I wanted to bring her in because she's going to give you a lot of information, and of course her contact information is on this slide. With that in mind, Bonita, I'm going to turn it over to you to start it, and I'll ask a couple questions as we go.
Perfect. Thanks, Ron. It's good to be here this morning. Yeah, the purpose of this is to educate people about the flood zone changes in and around the Park City area, so you're better educated so when these changes actually go into effect. So that's the purpose today. Hopefully we'll accomplish that goal.
Yep.
If your Park City property is located in a flood zone, your lender is going to require that you obtain flood insurance in order to get a mortgage. Even if your lender does not require flood insurance, there's two good reasons why you may want to have flood insurance anyway.
And we're going to talk about those a little further into our presentation. But let's return to that key question. Is your property in a flood zone?
So we have the National Flood Hazard Layer, which is FEMA. So you're working with the federal government here, and the NFIP, which is a National Flood Insurance Program, is the administrators of the flood plan, and then it's offered through independent agents. Currently, in and around Summit County and throughout the United States, the FEMA maps are being redrawn and reevaluated as they are every few years, just because water changes and things of that nature impact different properties differently.
And then this is an image from a satellite viewpoint. It's not the one we're going to focus in on just for obvious reasons in a moment, but it gives you an idea of the different color coding that will be used. So you can look at a geographical area, a neighborhood, you can put in your address, find out whether, well, if you're in the flood zone, you probably already know it, but if you're not and you maybe are going to possibly go into it, you'll be able to identify that, and this information will be important to you. This slide here gives you a link, and I apologize for how long it is, but it will take you directly to a website which I think would be most helpful if you're trying to find out whether you're going into the flood zone, perhaps you're in the flood zone and you're going to be removed, or if there's no change. So let me pop that up for you right now. And I'm going to, so that you can take advantage of this plat map, disappear.
Okay, so here's a map of the prospector area, and it's color-coded, as you can see. Anything in a blue zone means that there will be no change. So if you are currently in or out of a flood area, there will be no change to your current classification. If you are in a property where you currently are required to have flood insurance due to your lender requirements, and you're being pulled out of that area, that is reflected with the green. The red are the people who are not currently in a flood zone but are now being pulled into the flood zone. What's interesting about this slide, if we can zoom in along Annie Oakley Drive, in the past there were people, particularly along Annie Oakley Drive, who were in a flood zone required to carry flood insurance simply because their property was in a flood zone, although their home was not within that designated flood area.
So is this one up here an
Correct.
example of it?
That's a great example of
Okay,
it,
so
yes.
you got the green because you're in, but the home itself is not in, and therefore flood insurance would not be required. Okay.
Correct. So they're being pulled out because they're no longer in that risk
Because they're
hazard.
green.
Right, they're now completely green. Conversely, the red zone, those are people that are being pulled into the flood zone. And you'll notice that even on the homes here, and that is Lacey,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm forgetting the
Lily
name.
Langtree.
Lily Langtree, I'm sorry, excuse me. Lily Langtree Road, those properties are being pulled into. So you can see where the red overlaps. Okay?
So on this one here, You got a little bit of red, but the house is not in it. So
they are not going to be required to carry flood insurance in that particular property.
but on this one, the house is clearly in it, and this one even just a tiny
Yes.
bit of it is, and they're going to be required.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And
All
same
right.
with the one to the left as
This
well.
one here. Okay.
So those 4 properties are going to be pulled into it. Now, you can also do an address search. So if you go up into the top right, and it's a little small on the screen, I apologize for that, we can't really bring that up, but you can put in your property address. Now, there's not going to be a pop-up box because it's going to tell you yes, no, good news, bad news. It's going to take you an arrow and it's going to point to your house, and you're going to have to look at the map and say, hey, am I in a red zone? Am I in a green zone? And am I in a blue zone?
Now, Bonita, there's a number of these properties here that don't have any color code. What's going on there?
Well, I don't know exactly what's going on with all those properties. Some of them may be in a flood zone, some of them may not be. With the map redrawing, the only thing that's reflected on here is the areas of Prospector that have been reanalyzed.
Okay.
So if you are on Geronimo, but you're not color coded here, you're going to have to determine whether you're in a flood zone the traditional way, either through your lender, through your insurance agent, or through your real estate agent.
Okay, but presumably if it's your home, you know whether you're paying flood insurance or not.
Correct.
And if you have a mortgage, we're getting a little ahead of our presentation, but you would have been required by your lender to have.
Correct. Correct. If you have any kind of federally backed mortgage, you are required to carry flood insurance if you are in a flood zone.
Okay. All right, interesting. All right, well, we're going to keep going here and looking at a couple more slides. The reclassification is what you talked about, and so that's the areas that are color-coded one color or another.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And not every area is being looked at, in fact.
Correct.
Okay.
There's areas of Park City and Summit County that have not been reevaluated.
Okay, so if you're a property owner, you have 4 possible scenarios, right?
Correct. You either cannot be in a flood zone at all, in which case, woohoo, that's a good thing. You don't have a risk of flood. Traditionally, you don't have a risk of flood. You're in a flood zone, and you're going to stay in that flood zone, so nothing is going to change. So
That was the blue that we saw.
that
in
was the blue
previous
that we
chart.
saw, correct. You were in a flood zone, but now you're being removed from it. We like the smiley face because most people are happy about being removed from the flood zone because now they don't have the requirement to carry it if they do have a mortgage.
That was that green color.
Correct. Or you were not in a flood zone, but now you're going to be moved into a flood zone.
All right.
And that would be the red that was showed on the previous map.
All right, so now that you've given the bad news, I'm going to reappear for the presentation.
Reappear.
Here I am.
We're
All right,
magic.
so why is this important? We alluded to earlier that there are 2 key reasons why it's important. I'll let you explain them.
Well, if your property is not currently in the flood zone, it's going into the flood zone. If you have a mortgage on the property, your mortgage lender is going to require you to get flood insurance once these maps go into effect.
The reason I brought Bonita here is because we're going to show you before the end of this presentation how you can save up to 85% discount off that normal rate. And that's what got me excited to even want to do this webinar, to make sure you guys knew about this. And the beauty of it is that savings that we're going to tell you about is going to last through your entire ownership and may be available to your next owner, and we'll share with you how that works as well.
That's correct, and that's a little known fact. With people immediately look at this and they think, "Oh my goodness, it come in 2018 at some point. I'm going to be required to carry flood insurance. What is this going to cost? Is it going to be cost prohibitive?" Well, not necessarily if you act smartly and quickly, and most importantly, before these maps go into effect.
Yes.
If your property is currently in the flood zone and you're going to be removed from the flood zone, you will be able to cancel your existing flood insurance. So that's good news.
That's good news, because that's going to save you thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of dollars, because it's over the life of you owning that property. So that's a big savings.
It's a huge savings. Yes, it is. It's just another thing. Instead of having to pay homeowners insurance and auto and then your flood on top of that, you'll be able to drop off your flood insurance, which is a separate policy through the NFIP.
Okay. So let's look at the upcoming schedule. What can we anticipate here?
Okay, that's the big unknown at this point. The flood map remapping, the studies are completed, the tentative changes reflected on that map have been already released. They've been released to the public. If you were in an effective red area, you would have gotten a notice from the town of Park City or Summit County advising you of a meeting that was held, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago,
Okay.
where you could just meet with FEMA, you can meet with the NFIP representatives, the Army Corps of Engineers, the representatives from the city and the county to discuss your particular situation. Now, there will be an appeal process. Obviously, if you're in the green zone and you're being pulled out of the flood, I would be surprised if anybody wanted to appeal that and stay into the flood
I want
insurance.
to spend more money and pay my insurance.
Woohoo! Don't take me out, please. Let me pay flood insurance, please.
Don't do that.
So if you, but if you are being moved into the flood, a new red zone, there will be an appeal process. My discussions with the NFIP, with Matt Castle here in Park City, is that appeal process will likely open probably in the August 2017 timeframe. It has to be published in the Federal Register, and there's some federal legislative hoops and regulations that need to be jumped through. Again, keep in mind you're working with the government here, so it's not always smoothest and quickest
It's
process.
not going to happen super smooth?
It's not going to happen. Well, it's not going to happen super quickly. let's put it that.
Okay.
So yeah, we will, and that's why when Ron mentioned earlier, we'll be doing updates on these as more information becomes available. But you will have a 90-day to file your formal appeal. If you feel as though for whatever reason your property should not be dragged into a flood zone, you can appeal that process. Thereafter, the NFIP is going to review that, the city or the county is going to review that, and they're going to make a determination. Yes, we're going to keep it in the floodplain area, or no, we'll keep it as is. After all appeals have been heard and resolved, only at that point will we know the actual effective date of this new mapping. It's anticipated to happen sometime mid to late 2018. Best
Okay.
case scenario.
Okay. All right, and that would be critical for obtaining flood insurance as a
Correct.
requirement, and particularly critical if you're trying to get the savings we're going to tell you about in more detail here. Got to do it before that deadline. So you want to determine if your property is going to be moved into that flood zone. Again, if you're coming out, there's nothing for you to do other than celebrate. But if you're going in there, then it's important that you secure the lowest possible rate, because not only can you get the lowest rate, but you can lock it in forever. And so I'm going to turn that one over to you
Absolutely,
again.
that's correct, and that's a big provision. Anytime maps are changed like this, there is a grandfathering provision, and what that grandfathering provision says, hey look, if you are currently not in a flood zone, but you have the ability to purchase flood insurance, which everyone impacted on these maps does have the ability, you can purchase it at what's called an X zone rate. An X zone is the lowest rate available, and it's the lowest risk of flooding. So long as that flood insurance is in place prior to the effective date of the new mapping, you can keep that low rate.
Okay, excellent. And you're ultimately buying this from the NIFP, the insurance?
Correct. National Flood Insurance Program. It's overseen by FEMA. So FEMA sets the rules, National Flood Insurance Program implements the rules, and insurance agents and companies sell through.
Okay, so a homeowner isn't supposed to contact FEMA or NFIP. They contact their insurance
Correct.
agent.
They could go on the NFIP website and they can do a zip code search, and they can find agents in and around their area
Okay.
that offer insurance through the NFIP, but they cannot directly go online and purchase it.
Okay.
It's
All right.
direct
All right.
product.
So let's talk about this, because this is the savings that you were starting to introduce here, that timing of securing insurance before the reclassification finally is firm.
Correct. And this is what I talked about before. If you buy the flood insurance before the reclassification is complete, you lock in at that Zone X classification. And some of you are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, I don't have a mortgage. Nobody's forcing me to buy insurance. Even though I'm going to be put into a new zone, why would I want to spend money now on flood insurance?
It's a very good question, and we're going to answer that in just a moment, or at least
Yes,
give you
we
something
are.
to think about here. But I'm kind of curious about the cost. What does it cost for flood insurance?
Flood insurance varies tremendously depending on what zone you are in. A Zone X classification, again, the lowest zone, so anybody that's in a red zone being pulled into it is going to be in a Zone X classification currently. That is minimum premium. That's between $400 and $500 a year for the flood insurance.
And some of the other classifications?
They could be $1,300 to over $3,000 a year. Flood
Wow.
insurance can be very pricey when you get into some of the higher risk zones.
Okay, so what you're saying is if you secure it prior to officially being classified, then that may save you as much as maybe 85% off the regular rate that you might have later.
Absolutely.
And that's every year.
Correct. And that is grandfathered in. So long as that policy stays in force and there is no gap in coverage, that flood insurance will follow that property indefinitely at that lower classification.
Okay, that's huge.
That's huge.
So if you have flood insurance and you go to sell your property, you can transfer that discounted flood insurance to the new buyer.
Absolutely. And this is very unique in the insurance industry. Flood insurance is the only insurance on the market that can transfer from person to person. You can't do that with your auto insurance because we're looking at everyone individually on an auto. You can't do that with your homeowner's insurance. You can't do that with your life insurance or your health insurance. You can, however, do that with flood insurance because the only thing underwriters look at with flood insurance is the property itself. We don't care who owns that property. We are simply looking at flood maps, flood zones, and the property itself.
All right, very, very good information. So we mentioned earlier that there may be two reasons why you want to keep your flood insurance, again, on the assumption that your lender is not requiring it. And one of them is, of course, it gives you a peace of mind. You don't know when an incident might happen, and just having it, just like with your automobile, you have the peace of mind. And so that's a reason to write the check, but you still want to write it at the discounted rate.
Correct. And it does provide peace of mind. I know this year, particularly with our high snow, I mean, we just had an epic year here, and it's been fabulous for skiing. But I can't tell you how many phone calls I've been getting this spring about leaking foundations and flooding, or having tremendous water losses. Any groundwater that enters your property from outside is not going to be covered under a standard homeowner's policy. And people need to understand that. If you do not have flood insurance and you have a flood on your property, you have no coverage with your existing homeowners.
I didn't realize
None.
that.
Just like earthquake.
Okay. All right. Well, that's maybe there's three reasons.
Well, no, that goes to peace of mind.
Yeah, it's true. The other reason I want to highlight is it's a benefit when you go to sell your home in the future. And of course, as a real estate broker, we encounter this on transactions when we are helping people buy and sell properties that are in flood zones. The buyer of your property will need flood insurance, as we've said, if they get a mortgage. They will not have that discounted grandfathered rate that we've been talking about unless you transfer it to them. And if you've chosen not to have it, you don't have it available to transfer. Now, where this comes into play is when it comes to negotiating for you as a seller the highest possible price. So you can buy the flood insurance now as a benefit for your future owner. So you get the peace of mind, but you're in a position that may help you when you go to sell your property, get more money from the sale of your property because you're giving that buyer something that's going to save them thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars during their life of owning the property they may be buying from you. So something to really think about. So if you want to transfer your flood insurance to a buyer, or as a buyer may want to have the seller transfer it to them, it must be done before the closing and outside of closing. So it's not part of the actual closing process, but it would be easy to forget about. It has to be done before closing. Title company doesn't handle it, but the NFIP has forms that we're going to make available to you that you sign between both parties before closing.
Correct. The other thing the NFIP will not do is they will not get involved in the financial transaction on the transfer of ownership. So if you're 6 months into your flood insurance and you've already paid your full annual premium, it's between the buyer and the seller to work out a pro rata amount for the flood insurance for that remaining policy year. The NFIP, your insurance agent, nobody is going to get involved in that, the financial portion of who owes what to whom for the transfer of the flood insurance.
That's right. So, your real estate can help you figure out the prorations on that and
Sure.
facilitate it prior to closing.
But that needs to be stressed so much, because if it's not done prior to closing, you've lost your opportunity.
Okay. So if you have flood insurance, you go to sell your property, you can transfer that at a discount and maybe get more money from the sale of your property. That's a reason for you to think about it.
Okay, so the National Flood Insurance Program, you will be notified. The formal notices have not gone out. The notices that have gone out thus far have been just to advise people about the meeting that we had here in Park City and Summit County a month or two ago. But you will get a notice that your property is going into a flood zone. However, you will not be notified if your property is coming out of a flood zone. That's going to be up to you to go to the map. Can we flip that to that map?
Yeah, let me pop that up here.
Just go back to the map and just remind you of what we're looking at here. So if you are currently purchasing, if you're on Annie Oakley Drive, for instance, and you currently have flood insurance, you can look at this map and you can work with your lender once these go into effect and say, hey, look, I'm no longer in a flood zone. Release me from the requirement to carry my flood insurance. And in order to cancel that flood insurance, your lender does need to sign off on it. So they're going to need, when you submit your cancellation form, you are going to be required to also submit a notice from your lender saying, it's okay, I'm releasing Ron from his obligation to purchase flood insurance. That's the only way it can be canceled. You can't do it unilaterally.
All right, so that's really important information.
Oh, we just covered that. I'm just jumping ahead a little bit.
That mind is constantly moving.
My mind never turns on. Welcome to my head.
So here's the steps that, again, just to reiterate, go verify the website like we've shown you, contact your lender, and then contact your insurance provider that helped you to secure it to begin with. And there is a specific form, NFIP form, and it's hard to read, and Bonita tells me
print.
even in real life it's really small print, but this is the form that is used.
Correct. And this form is just a general change form, so you can do a lot with this form, which is why it's so busy. But this is available to all insurance agents that offer flood insurance, and they can walk you through how to go about whether you're transferring the ownership prior to closing, or if you're canceling it, or if you're changing your mortgage company, or any other changes with the flood insurance is done through this one general form.
Catch-all form. Okay. Well, we know how absolutely fascinating this topic has been, flood insurance, but it really is an important one. I want to remind you, you can catch up on the Park City market with our monthly Market Talk webinars. As there are developments and as these deadlines start approaching, we're going to constantly remind you in our monthly webinar about this and refer back either to this webinar for more details, or we're going to re-record it with additional information. So it will always be available on our website at BuyParkCityRealEstate.com. And if you're just interested in catching the most recent Park City Market Talk webinar, just go to that website at the top, select Watch a Webinar Now, and it will take you to that page. In the meantime, if you have any questions, here's our email addresses, ron@thewilsteinteam.com. And boy, how do you say that whole thing?
I know. Bonita.vanderkooi.QUGY@stayfarm.com. I should have given you my redirect, which is just Bonita@BonitaVanderkooi.com. So you can use either of those.
Okay, there you go. So if you want to chat with either myself or Bonita, have questions, either send us the email or include your phone number and a preferred time, and we'll get back to you. This is an important topic, represents a huge savings to yourself, possibly an expense, but in a beneficial way because it's warranted, and certainly a benefit when you go to sell your property. We certainly want to make sure that you catch the benefits of this change. With that in mind, I hope this isn't you floating down the street from when we get the runoff from the big snowstorms that we
In your
have.
little swimming pool with your little cocktail in your hand.
Exactly.
All your kids waiting to be picked up in the corner.
That's right. Does that have a ladder on that? Oh, well. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to watch this. Hope it's been informative, and keep on checking in with us. We'll keep you informed about what's happening in Park City.
Perfect. Thanks, Ron, for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.